Welcome back to the No More Lazy Thinking series, where we're aiming to help you build your mental might. Today, I'd like to come back to the idea of intellectual honesty. One of the ways that we can keep ourselves honest as we assess a situation or as we break down a problem and try to solve the piece parts of it, one of the ways we can do that is by asking direct, thoughtful questions, whether it's out loud to somebody else who's involved, or even if it's just in our own mind as we're trying to get clarity about a situation. The purpose of asking questions that are logical and rational is to help you step back away from your emotional response. Remember, emotions are good to have, and they are a single point of data, but they're not the only thing that should influence your decisions and your responses. So to help you step back and remain objective, you ought to ask questions. Questions like, what's the intent of the source where I'm getting this information? Does this source have any hidden agenda? Does this source have a driving motivation, or do I, as I'm analyzing this information? You could ask, what's the proof? Is it truly provable? You want to take a step back as you're being objective to ask questions like, well, what is the primary source of this information? Not the secondary source, that's someone who has repeated it, but the primary source. Who gathered this information? Who conducted this research? Who came up with this proof? And once you know the primary source, you can then determine whether that source is, in your estimation, trustworthy or not. You might also ask, has this been proven again? Has it been verified by an independent source? Not two sources who look alike, think alike, always operate in tandem, but two independent sources. Think about who is impacted. Maybe as you're thinking about making a decision or how you apply the information, you'd ask yourself, who will be impacted by this information? How will they be impacted? What is the extent of that impact? How big or how small is it? And avoid the temptation to look at any single case, because that can certainly trigger our emotions and cause us to make assumptions that may not be accurate. But dig a little deeper to understand factually how big the impact is and what the impact is. You could also ask questions like, does this make sense? Does this make sense with everything else I know? Do the things line up? The pieces, are they aligned? Because if one thing that you know contradicts something else that you know, those two things cannot coexist. One of them may not be accurate, and your job as a critical thinker is to figure out which one turns out to no longer be accurate, turns out to need a little bit more context or information so that they match up, they fit not just the narrative, but the facts. Sometimes when there's a great deal of ambiguity, when I don't know for sure what's right or what's wrong, no matter how much critical thinking and how much introspection I put into it, here's a litmus test that I like to use. Before I decide on one action versus another, I ask myself, what if I'm wrong? If I'm thinking this way and I act, what if I'm wrong? What would the consequences be? Who would be hurt? How hard would it be to come back and take a different position and make up for any damage done? And then I have to have exactly equivalent thought about the other side. Well, if I do this instead, what if I'm wrong? Who would be hurt by that? How damaging would it be? Could I come back from that and make up for any adverse effects that may have been caused because of the decision I made that was wrong? We need to know. We need to take time to critically reflect on our decisions before we make them, not to slow things down, not to procrastinate, but to make better, more fully informed decisions. There are limitless other questions that you could be asking. The point today that I want to make sure to leave you with is that you should ask questions. You should dig a little bit. You should understand, if for no other reason than to be more confident in the path that you decide to take. Thanks for joining me today. Keep working on your mental might and join me again for a video about how to stop all that lazy thinking and become more disciplined as a solid, productive thinker.